The gravity of the time is such that every new avenue of peace, no matter how dimly discernible, should be explored. Never before in history has so much hope for so many people been gathered together in a single organization. You will provide a great share of the wisdom, of the courage, and the faith which can bring to this world lasting peace for all nations and happiness and well-being for all men.
Alan Woods, welcome to Titans of Nuclear.
Thank you, Brett. It's nice to see you again.
So
in
you're
this virtual world.
Yes, of course. So you're the Director of Strategy and Business Development at Rolls Royce, and I know you spent a long time there as well. But before that, I'd like to know how you even got involved and interested in nuclear to begin with.
Well, I actually came into nuclear through the defence side. I'm an engineer by background, so whilst I'm Director of Strategy and Business Development for our SMR business now, originally I was an engineer, and I was actually an electrical engineer. And I ended up in nuclear through working in the defence side within submarines, and my original engineering activity was focused around control systems for nuclear, for submarine plants. And within that part of my career, I had responsibility for both what they call the manoeuvring room, the control room for the reactor, and also all of the safety critical reactor control and instrumentation systems. So it was quite a far-ranging scope, and it was great. I really enjoyed it. The fact that you're controlling the power on a nuclear submarine is quite something else, and that's what really captivated my interest. And of course, as a control systems engineer in nuclear, you can't help but get deeply embedded in understanding the rest of the nuclear plant, and that's really where my interest started from.
Amazing. Now, the controls for submarines have different requirements than the nuclear controls for power plants, right? Because as far as I understand, and correct me if I'm wrong, one of the things that's important for a nuclear submarine is to be able to change power levels very quickly, like the actual reactor core power levels, not just your electric output levels.
I'm not really going to comment on the submarine side of stuff, but quite clearly they have different set of operational requirements. It moves for starters. A land-based reactor is about grid power, so and our focus in SMR is all around the requirements of grid power. And they are somewhat different to if you're operating something that's of a moving nature.
So just to make sure we follow the progression of your career, how long were you in the Navy for?
Sorry, I wasn't in the Navy. That was within Rolls Royce.
Oh, within Rolls Royce. Oh, I see.
Rolls Royce has two parts to its nuclear business. One is defence, where it supports the UK's Royal Navy in designing and operating those plants. And it also has its civil nuclear business, of which SMRs is a part.
And was this your first job, though?
Yeah, I joined Rolls Royce as a graduate engineer. And within that, Rolls Royce is a great company. You have many opportunities to move around. So I had a base business, and I moved around different parts of the company. So I worked in marine, I worked in aerospace, and now I work in civil nuclear, and then more specifically SMR. So throughout my career, I've always had that opportunity to move around, not just different roles, from engineering through program management through to strategy, but also in different parts of the business, including quite a long stint I did in corporate strategy, which is a fantastic place to work. Within a company like Rolls Royce, we do lots of very different things, from technologies, markets, and that gives so much interest from a career perspective.
And what is corporate strategy for those who aren't in the business world? Is that like mergers and acquisitions and that kind of stuff?
So corporate strategy in our world, in Rolls Royce, it covers everything that is what we call organic activity and inorganic activity. So inorganic would be your mergers, acquisitions. Organic activity includes things like what's our market strategy, what's our product strategy, what's our future product portfolio. So we work closely with the technical folk who look at new technologies within the company. So it gives a very broad range of aspects, but it does focus across all of those products, markets, new and old, and then inorganic and organic. It's quite far-reaching. It's extremely interesting. You never do the same thing twice in the corporate strategy.
And paint the picture of Rolls-Royce more generally for us. What's its history, and how much of it is nuclear? How much is Navy? How much of it is airplane engines? Break it down for us.
Yeah. So Rolls-Royce, as you're probably well aware, is most famous for its cars, but we don't actually do cars anymore. The cars part of Rolls-Royce was sold. The more recent history of the business, which I say recent, is probably 80 years or so, has focused on aero engines. That's been the biggest part of our business. And we are today predominantly focused on wide-body aircraft. So that's aircraft like the 380, 787, Airbus A350.
But just the engine part, right? You don't build the airplane,
Yeah.
just the engine.
No, we provide the engines. That's the neat bit. We also have a defence business, which contains aerospace products, land-based products, marine products, and of course submarines. And we have a power systems business. In our power systems business, we provide power generation systems. So for land-based applications, whether it be for data centers, for other backup power generation needs, we're also, it's one of the most exciting parts of our business as well, because some of the new technologies around the decarbonisation agenda, around things like microgrids, fuel cells, hydroelectric, and things like that. That's a fascinating change in that part of the business, which we're really embracing. There's lots of opportunity there in energy, as we all know. Energy is becoming the key part of the global debate and how we decarbonise it, and that goes beyond just power. It's about heat and transport as well. And thankfully, in Rolls-Royce, we have products that are suitable in all of those areas, and we're really pioneering some of the developments that will be core in the future.
And so you've got aircrafts, you've got defense, and you've got power. And I guess nuclear, the nuclear expertise kind of sits in between or overlaps on both the defense side and the power side?
Correct, yeah. As does aerospace expertise and marine expertise. You know, what we like to do is introduce products where we can have multiple applications for them. And yes, there may be changes. So, we look at an engine for flight would be slightly different to an engine for a land-based application. There's a different set of requirements which drive a different solution, but some of the core technology we like to reuse and exploit across multiple markets. That's been something we've done throughout our history and done very successfully.
Got it. So you started off your career, you started off in the control system aspect on the defense side, but within the nuclear realm. How did it progress over then? You mentioned corporate strategy, but what was kind of the arc of it?
Yeah, so I began as an engineer. I moved into program management. And why did I move into program management? I think I really enjoyed seeing the slightly bigger picture, getting involved in stuff outside of my niche part of engineering, and I found that I guess I was a little bit rushed. I wanted to get that experience more quickly, so I moved into program management, and from there I then moved into a corporate strategy role. I did a stint over in the US with Rolls Royce, which was great as part of a rotation assessment. Then I moved into corporate strategy. part of my role in corporate strategy back in the time was looking at how might we broaden some of our business aspects, and energy was certainly one of the hot topics. It was when the environmental agenda was just starting. Wind farms were becoming very prevalent. Solar was on the increase. Tidal was being looked at. And conscious of our nuclear heritage, we previously had activities in civil nuclear business. We started to consider setting up a nuclear sector, and I was part of that from a corporate strategy perspective. And as a result, I moved into that business when we established it back in 2008.
And so, what did it look like in 2008, and how has it changed over the years?
Oh yeah, it was. Well, in 2008 we had ideas. It was at the start of what they called the nuclear renaissance, if you remember.
Yeah.
And in the UK particularly, the government at the time had a white paper energy policy that allowed the build of new nuclear. So we had many variations of technologies and customers coming to the market, putting in interest to go through the generic design assessment licensing process in the UK. So we had the EPR with Arriva Framatome, we had Westinghouse, we had the ABWR, and it was fertile ground. And there was a lot of activity generating, a lot of industrialization generating around that. So our business at that point was very much in the mode of, I wouldn't necessarily say startup, but it was a new market. We had this new big emerging market, so we were establishing a footprint, we're establishing the right capabilities and growing the skills and expertise we needed to operate in that new growing new build market. It's changed enormously over time, and we as Rolls Royce, we're a global business. That we don't look at anything through the lens of complete local. So whilst the UK market was a catalyst for our growing, we immediately looked at how we can build those key customer relationships across a broader geographical footing. That's really what's required for us to have those customer relationships that are important to our customer. That's the way we can best offer our value to them.
And what were you selling?
To explain.
And what were you selling? Let's say you started it up in 2008. By 2014, 2016, as the business had matured, what was the actual thing that Rolls Royce was selling?
Yeah, within our nuclear business, we operate a number of aspects. We have an instrumentation and controls business. We have a services business. And we're also looking at new build, so a manufacturing systems design business.
So just so I can understand that a little better. So the instrumentation controls, that's like hardware and software, I guess, to go along with it.
Correct.
And then on the new build, that's just like engineering services. So nothing physical is being sold, but engineering expertise is being sold.
No, we are selling physical. So we provide some of the key systems that go on a nuclear plant. So emergency diesel generator system, for example. And this is a good example of where Rolls-Royce brings its expertise to bear, because we can marry together the product set we have in our power systems business with our nuclear business. And we offer that as a solution which combines products from multiple parts of the Rolls-Royce family of companies. And it's a powerful offering. And that's a big system for the nuclear plant. It's a safety critical system. So that's an example of the product type areas we provide. And within that, we provide our own product. So some of it is our own engines, but we also operate in the procurement role for the balance of the system integration role. So we also use the supply chain for the rest of those parts.
Got it. Okay, so then how is it, so that's kind of, as the business matured, those are some of the roles that you play in the nuclear industry. What has it looked like lately in the last couple of years? What has it transformed into?
Yeah. So the market has changed for us. The nuclear renaissance that was on everybody's lips at the start of the last decade, I think has arguably not played out in the manner which everybody expected. The large reactor build programs in the West have suffered incrementally increasing problems. And it's not all of their own making. Many of them are of a financing nature due to the very large capital. And that's a function of the the willingness of investors to put the money into those kind of programs. It's been against the backdrop of some developments in oil and gas world where gas has been particularly cheap. It's been seen as a good alternative before any real climate change agenda took a grip. So nuclear's had some big headwinds. Some of its headwinds have been of its own making. The large plants are very large capital, they're very complex, so they do suffer delays and they do suffer cost overruns. And all of that context, from a attractiveness position, has not really positioned nuclear very well. You ask most people in the general public, and we've run some surveys, actually most people are not anti-nuclear, but what they are anti is just the constant cost overruns and delays to the programs. So, you know, we as Rolls Royce, we did take a decision that SMRs, small modular reactors, really do have a significant opportunity here. We do know how to make things, and more than that, as Rolls Royce, we know how to make things in factories. And what we've learned over the many years we've been manufacturing complex components and systems is it's not just about saying I'll put stuff in a factory. It's what we do in the factory that's important. It's how we design the product for manufacturing that factory, and how we design the factory specifically to manufacture that product. That's how we are able to take significant manufacturing time out and reduce manufacturing costs significantly. We're also a nuclear company. We do have nuclear design expertise. And we considered that having a product which you can manufacture and you can turn into a product away from a very large infrastructure program is the way forward. So that's what attracted us to SMRs. And in recent years, our focus has really shifted to our SMR program. But I must add that our SMR program is not about a nuclear reactor, it's about a power station. And we only get the economics right if we design the power station as a whole. The nuclear island part, which everybody focuses on, is only about 20 to 25% of the capital. If we're really going to address the economic challenges that nuclear's have, but also provide a product which we can build with certainty to schedule and cost, we have to address the engineering challenges of the total system, the total power station.
I agree with you on this point. But then, you know, when I brought this up, some of the skeptics have said, well, yes, if you look at just the nuclear island, you know, that's only, 20%, let's say, of the cost. Some people say even as low as 15% of the cost. But they say, but you're not considering the fact that it is a nuclear plant drives a lot of costs in your balance of plant. For instance, like seismic qualifications. If you're building the whole site to nuclear seismic qualifications, yeah, you can say that, your costs weren't technically part of the nuclear island, but the reason that it costs, $2 billion to lay a foundation instead of, what they might do for another thermal plant, tens of millions, 100 million or something, that's nuclear related, even if it's not part of the nuclear island. So what do you say to that?
Yeah, I'd say that's one of the big challenges of SMRs. So, and this is one of the challenges our engineers faced very early on. SMRs only work if you are building the same thing over and over. You only get the benefits of factory manufacture if you're manufacturing the same parts over and over. And that means that we can't be in a situation where we're having to redesign the plant for every particular site we want to build it on. That's what drives the cost into nuclear, because you're absolutely right. The protagonists who say, yes, you have to, it drives cost into every other part of the power station because it's all related to nuclear. It's true, and every time you have to make a change, you've got to re-justify that change and its implications across the whole plant. So making changes for a site-specific application can become very expensive. And if you're at an SMR level where your power output is lower, some of those cost changes don't scale with the power. So we've got to address that.
How do you address that? That's a great.
So we have addressed it. So the first thing we did was we recognised this as a power station. We recognised this issue, and we've assembled a team of partners from in a quite wide industrial base, which brings together all the capabilities required to design and build a power station. And one of our key requirements, our whole approach is a market-driven requirements-based approach. And one of those key requirements has to be repeatability. If we can't get repeatability, the benefits of volume becomes less relevant. So how do we standardize? Our plant is specifically designed to have a small footprint. So it's smaller in power output, but it's also much, much smaller in terms of its geographical size. It's about 1.5 football pitches or soccer pitches.
So what is that? What is that in terms of acres? That's like 10 acres or something, or how many acres is?
A
couple acres.
1.5 football pitches. I work in football pitches. Right, I don't know. Yeah, I think it's around that.
And are you talking about the whole site, or are you talking about just the building that it sits on? Because a football field seems like it would be pretty small for a whole site.
That's the power plant.
Okay.
So the site boundary it will be bigger, but not a huge amount bigger. But yeah, that's the power plant.
And this would be for how much power output?
Sorry?
For how much power output?
That's a 440 megawatt power output.
Great.
But it's the footprint of the power plant which is really important from a standardization perspective, because that small footprint allows us to mount all the plant and machinery that forms the power station on what we call an aseismic bearing, and that insulates all of that plant and machinery from the specific site conditions.
Tell me more about this. Yeah, tell me more about this aseismic bearing. So is this like, I remember when I was reading about the Apple facility, their spaceship facility, the whole thing is on like giant, roller wheels. Is it the same concept?
It's not on roller wheels, but yeah, it's a concept that's been around in the civil engineering world for a while. It's widely used. It's not been used quite for this application before, and hence, we do have a requirement, and we are talking very early with regulators about it. But the principle of this is well understood. The engineering is well understood, and it's proven technology. It's how we apply it, which is the important feature. But it does provide that insulation from the specific seismic conditions. So all of the plant and machinery, it can remain common, irrespective of the site we're delivering to. And that is absolutely critical to get that commonality, which allows us to get the repeatability and therefore the benefits of a production line approach in the factory and get the benefits of a learner effect. None of that would be possible if we are constantly having to tweak the design for every single site. And the protagonists are absolutely right. The minute you start tweaking the design for every single site, your costs are going through the roof.
And tell me more about this, how this mitigates like seismic qualifications. Is the idea that you can resist up to a 9.0 earthquake with these system, or like how does that actually work?
Yeah. So the aseismic bearing is the only thing that is specific to the site.
Okay.
Every site will have a different aseismic bearing, and it's tuned specifically to allow only a limited seismic scenario through that base map.
Yeah.
So no matter where we build it, the seismic bearing will be different for each site, but it's only, depending on the site, it's 5 to 10% of the capital. It's the only bit that's unique and specific to the site. All the plant and machinery that sits on it, that aseismic bearing is tuned to ensure that whatever the seismic conditions that the plant machinery sees are just common. So we design all of that plant machinery to a set standard, set seismic conditions, and the aseismic bearing is tuned and designed to ensure that that's the maximum it'll ever see. Now, what that also enables us to do is not only standardise, but we modularise everything that sits on that aseismic bearing, including the civil structures. So all of the equipment that sits on that aseismic bearing is factory fabricated.
And this includes like concrete,
Yeah.
concrete stuff?
Yeah.
And how big
Yeah.
a piece of concrete can you factory produce?
Right, we have, so our civil partner is focused on providing what is called standard components. So we'll have a standard library of civil structures, which will be designed to accommodate all the requirements we have in the plant. But again, there will be a discrete number of civil structures. They're not all, we're not just going to have one-offs. We're not going to be building a very complex civil structure over here just for one particular circumstances. This is Lego brick approach or stickle brick approach, right?
And just so I understand, are the civil structures, are they literally factory produced, or is it just the formwork is common so it's more standardized? Or are you like, is there literally a factory that like you're pouring concrete in that factory and then you put it on the back of a truck and then you drive that concrete structure to the site?
Correct.
And so how far away can this site, a concrete producing factory, be before it becomes cost prohibitive from a physically moving that much weight around perspective?
Right. So let me answer the first question first. So yes, they're all factory fabricated, and that enables us to get a much better what's the term? We get much better consistency in how we do the manufacturing, so we can guarantee it better because it's all done in a controlled environment. We get better accuracy of the pour. It's interesting from a regulatory perspective because they have to then inspect in the facility, not at site, which has some challenges against what has normally been done. And so this is another area where we need to, and we are engaging with regulators early on to accommodate. But we get much better quality control ability within a controlled environment in a factory. We don't have any weather conditions, for example, that impact our concrete pour. So then we transfer them to site. So all our modules, whether it be the civil structure, the civil modules, the mechanical, electrical modules, or the primary modules, all of them are designed to be road transportable across UK and Europe. That's a key requirement, and it's also a limiting factor. It's a key requirement because this is an SMR, and it necessarily needs to get to places that will be landlocked, maybe on a river or a lake, not necessarily on the sea. So road or rail transportability is critical. Otherwise, we're designing a plant which physically we wouldn't be able to get to those sites. With it being modular, it's not a case where you could just dismantle it down to a further number of discrete parts and build it on site. You're just removing all the benefits you get from going to a modular design. So all our modules are designed to be road transportable, and that in principle means you can transport them over whatever distance you like. Now, the other thing I would add is this is a factory-built product. So in the same way as you don't, if you're a car exporter, you don't go and build cars everywhere that you want to sell them. You have factories which you make them. And any country that imports them just recognises that if it wants those cars, it imports them. It's the same with this. We're not going to build facilities everywhere we're going to build them. We can't. That will destroy the economics. Nevertheless, internationally, of course, we will need to, if there's certain large markets, the whole Rolls Royce business model is on having regional hubs to bring in that manufacturing capacity. And that is something that as a consortium we are prepared to do.
And how many do you have to sell to make the cost of the factory itself worthwhile?
Yeah, so the payback on factory, it does depend on the module facility. So our module facilities are assembly facilities, essentially. The civil module facility and the M&E module facility are of a...
M&E stands for mechanical and electrical?
Yeah,
okay.
yeah. Sorry, yeah. Those are less heavy than the primary vessel facility. The primary vessel facility is the most costly facility because it requires some specialist machinery in it, and it does move and manufacture the most heavy components. So if that's our baseline, that's the most expensive facility. That's the one which drives the biggest number of returns in terms of volume. The return on that facility it's a function of not just the number of units, but the pace at which we build the units as well. And we don't actually need that many. We anticipate that we'll need current modelling around 10 units to break even on the factory.
And then who pays for that factory? Who pays for that factory up front then? It seems like a bit of like a chicken and an egg problem. If you need to sell power plants to build the factory and you need to build the factory to sell the power plants, which comes first?
Yeah, you need both. You need visibility of the forward orders to underpin commercial investment in facilities. That's normal.
And so does this mean that
we have confidence in our product?
Yeah. So does this mean that you have to at least like get purchase orders of those first 10 plants, and then you show up at a bank and you say, "Hey, bank, give me a loan for $1 billion to build this factory based on these purchase orders"? Is that the general gist of it?
Well, it depends who's financing the factories. But the gist of it doesn't matter whether you're turning to a bank or whether you're trying to convince a board to invest in the capital for the factory. The principle of I need some level of certainty on my return on investment is still valid. And that certainty, it's not binary, it has a sliding scale. So do we expect to be in a position, do we need to be in a position on day one where we can say, look, here's the totality of all the forward orders and this is exactly what you're going to get over the next 30 years? No, we don't. Equally, are we going to turn up to an investment committee, whether it be inside of an industrial party or to a bank, and say, hey, I want to build this facility and I've got no orders? No, absolutely not. We've got to be, but there's a balance in the middle. Yes, we will need visibility and we will need some orders. We will need visibility of a forward market. In the UK or in other territories, that typically comes in the form of an energy policy, which is saying I want to build so many gigawatts of nuclear. An energy policy of that nature is great for us, alongside a number of early units, because we have confidence in our plan, and this is where our job comes in. If we weren't absolutely confident that our plant will do what it says on the tin, that is deliver electricity at an extremely competitive rate, we won't be doing this project anyway. And because we have that belief, once we've overcome that hurdle of the first units where we've demonstrated it, and we have the visibility of the forward market opportunity, we will sell the units. The market opportunity here shouldn't be underestimated, because we often get obsessed with grid power. And grid power is one thing, but when we look in the context of total energy system, we as the human race uses far more energy in transport and heat than we do in grid power. And
who takes the risk on the cost of the power plant? Is this like a turnkey? Because most like manufacturing goods use the analogy of a car before. When I buy a car from Ford, they tell me, the price is, $20,000 or $30,000, and that's the price. I don't have to pay any more than that. Is Rolls Royce also changing the business model in this sense, where they're offering a fixed price turnkey product for the power plant?
Our ability to do that is dramatically enhanced because this is a product, as I said. So our consortium, which will shortly be a joint venture company, that joint venture company is delivering a set of products out of factories which it can assemble on a site and, when combined, form a power station. We as the JV will take that contract to deliver that product in the same way as when you order a car with Ford, it will take the contract to deliver that car. And that car is made up of all its constituent parts, which come from a broad supply chain.
For a fixed price.
A smaller product.
So and this would be like for a fixed price that's known up front. So it's like you negotiate with the utility and you say, our JV is going to offer this product for $3 billion, and it's not going to be a penny more than $3 billion. And we'll take the risk. If it's $3.1 billion, we lost $100 million. Is that kind of how it works?
Yeah, I mean, different customers will want to try out different commercial models. Fixed price model, it's attractive to certain customers, but equally, customers know that if they insist on a fixed price, then whoever's delivering that will naturally attribute some risk contingency to that fixed price nature. So target costs, incentivize contractors, and a variation on it. But the principle of, we'll stand by what it costs us to build the product, and therefore we'll deliver that to customers for that fixed price. Because with this being a factory-derived product, we know how much it'll cost us, Brett. We don't have the same issues of it's a one-off here. We're going to have to get something redesigned, and we don't yet know what the extent of the redesign will be because it's a different site. We haven't got any of those things. It's standard. It's the same as we did it last time, exactly. It's off a production line. And in fact, from delivery perspective, if this site needs a part and we've got one sitting there from that was earmarked for this site, and we can manage the delivery between, we can do that with our plant because it's a standard product. The other aspect which is enabled from our small site footprint is a feature which we often refer to as our fourth site factory or site canopy. And this is key because it completely removes the impact of the environment on the assembly site. And I use the term assembly site because for us it is a modular assembly site. So our build schedule is what we call 2+2, 2 years for the ASIS bearing, 2 years for the assembly, commissioning and test of the modules on the site. That site activity, the biggest risk to delay on that site activity comes from weather-related risk, particularly in climates like the Northern Hemisphere. And the UK particularly, or Northern Europe, you could lose up to 40% of your available working hours per year just through weather-related risk. Now, of course, you can factor that into your schedule, and you can apply a risk contingency to accommodate the fact that it might be worse. All of that is just increasing your financing costs. You've got a longer time over which you're borrowing money, you're paying more back.
Yep.
If you're carrying additional risk, you're carrying additional risk contingency, so your cost of borrowing is going up and your absolute capital is going up. So all of it's just sending your costs up and up and up.
Yeah, no, this sounds great. So and when you say this canopy
removes that risk entirely.
So this canopy, tell me more about this. I think I've seen some pictures online where it looks like almost like a shiny armadillo shell of some sort. Is that about right?
That's actually part of the final plan.
Oh wow. Okay. So what does the canopy look like?
The site canopy actually it looks like a factory. It's modular in its own right, and it goes up on day one and comes down at the end of the 4-year period. And it's the size of a couple football fields essentially. Yeah. It just covers that 1.5 football field site.
And are such canopies?
It contains the craneage, so we don't need the big tower cranes. We can improve our efficiency of operations by having the something like swarm cranes even could be introduced. And the key issue is
are such canopies used already in the construction industry for other types of production?
Yeah. So again, the partner who's working on consortium, they're experts in this field. They've done it before. They've done it on not quite this scale, but not far off. And it's entirely they've worked up this design, and they've got high confidence in it, very high confidence. And actually, the benefits of it, Brett, are it does cost something.
Yeah.
Of course, it provides an additional cost. It's not a huge amount of additional cost, but the benefit is enormous because not only does it remove that risk, it also introduces contingency because our baseline schedule is a 2-shift pattern for build. We can, of course, if we really need to, work 24/7 inside that canopy because we can control the environmental conditions, and including the lighting.
What's an example of so this would be, I guess, the biggest one of these canopies to ever be built or be used in construction. What's the next biggest? Is there a project that was successful that we can look and see, hey, this worked on the combined cycle plant in Nebraska? Is there something like that?
Yeah. Not to my knowledge in the power industry, but our partner has used it for other infrastructure related projects around some of the transportation projects they've done.
And how much bigger is this one going to be than that one?
Not that much bigger, to be honest. It's well within the realms of us being able to extend the parameters.
And so how much do these cost, these canopies? Is this like a $50 million operation?
Yeah, it's almost spot on. It's about 50 million, yeah.
Okay, great, yeah.
So it does provide additional cost, but it saves that huge benefit. We also think that it could even derive the cost of it back from the savings that it will provide to the operator in terms of the environmental impact assessments they need to do the other way. Because we are now in a contained environment, but the containment is two-way. So we're protecting the environment from the activity that's going on the site. And that means that a lot of the environmental impact assessment associated with the impact on the region from a build perspective, build destruction perspective, doesn't apply. We don't have particulate emissions to the atmosphere during construction, for example. They're all contained. So it has multiple benefits. It delivers way more than its cost back in value, way more. But the first crucial thing is it's completely remove that risk, and it gives us certainty on that build schedule as a result.
Amazing. So, so you mentioned earlier that Rolls Royce has shifted its focus towards SMRs. What does that shift actually mean? Is the old nuclear business sticking around? Has it totally are all the human resources now being applied to SMRs? What does the organization look like now?
It's a bit of both. We have divested some of our businesses which were in markets or territories which weren't core to the strategic direction of the business, which is around SMRs and new build. We've kept parts of our business which use the same skill set as we need in SMRs, and which also are critical to serving some of our common customers.
And so how big is the organization now? What does this SMR effort look like moving forward? How many people?
Yeah, in our SMR business now, we have about 300, 350 folk.
And what is that divided up into? That's like mostly engineers, or half and half engineers and business people?
No, it's virtually all engineers. I'd say 95% is engineers.
And they're all working on this new project, or they're still kind of maintaining old service contracts as well? Or I guess I'm trying to figure out how.
So there's an additional. Sorry, the numbers I gave you are for the SMR, our SMR entity, which is Rolls Royce and our partners.
Yep.
Across our partners working on the SMR program right now, we have broadly that number of people. On the rest of our business, we've probably got a similar number again, who are working on existing contracts for existing customers. So we have people supporting EDF's new build program in the UK. That's important.
Yep.
To the UK nationally. It's important to our business that we deliver on those obligations. We'll continue to do that. And we continue to support some of our customers from a service perspective with their operational fleets. And so I'd say rather than a shift, we're shifting the focus, but consolidating our business around the key skills that are associated in the near term with new build and design.
Love the concept. Love where you guys are going with this. True pioneers in this space. And I think the UK market is a great one as well, from everything that I've learned. What are some of the next milestones that you guys want to hit, or that you have to see in order to make the first build a reality?
Yeah, so we have, as you'd expect, we have a gated program. That's a phase-gated program, and the milestones that are achievable at each of the gates are a combination of technical milestones and what we'd call commercial milestones. So on the technical milestones, the near-term objective is to sanction all of our key innovations. And what I mean by that is we are innovating for benefit, not for the sake of innovation. So you won't find technology for technology's sake on our plan. All that does is introduce regulatory risk, and it introduces the risk of delay. So in sanctioning all our innovations, part of the sanction is what's the true benefit of the innovation and what's the true risk of the innovation.
This is like an internal audit process of some sort?
Yeah, this is an internal process we follow. So we have an some of the innovations that we've looked at are brilliant technical solutions, but they're solutions to a problem that doesn't exist. And we cannot, as the nuclear industry, we don't believe, continue to be in a world where we are providing solutions to problems which don't exist.
Yep.
Nuclear industries constantly doing that, and we have to provide solutions to problems that do exist, namely cost and risk.
Totally agree. Okay, so that's the internal review. What's next then on the technology track, and what's next on the commercialization track?
Yeah, so next on the technology track is we enter the UK generic design assessment process, and we'll be doing that early next year.
And how long? How long does that? Do you expect that to take?
Yeah, notionally that's 4 years, but we are working with the regulator to see how that might be reduced, and the regulator is keen to take a look at the GDA process and streamline it where we can. So that's great. We really welcome that approach from the UK regulator. We think it's great. So hopefully we can shorten that. Our baseline program still is operating on the basis of that 4 years, though. On the commercial side, so we are working with UK government, and UK government, as you'll be aware, is providing us with some match funding for the current phase of the program. And for that, they have set some milestones on us, of course, as you'd expect. They want to see us having things like our joint venture company needs to be formed within the next 12 months. That's one of our commercial milestones. We have other milestones that are more market related. So we do need from clarity on that forward market that we spoke about earlier to give confidence in subsequent investment decisions. And that necessarily needs to come in the form of some form of energy policy, which states that this is the trajectory, whether it be in the context of decarbonisation or not, that the nation is on to decarbonise the economy. And as a result, this is the natural mix of low carbon energy sources that we will be pursuing. But this is the position that SMR fits.
Out of all places, it seems like the UK already has all of the energy policy you'd ever need for nuclear, because it's got this decarbonization goal, not just in the electricity sector, but across all sectors for 2050. It seems to me that that's all you need. What else are you guys waiting for in terms of energy policy?
Well, you would have thought that might be all that's needed, but in the commercial world, it's not, because when you're investments in infrastructure, national infrastructure, are by definition expensive. You're talking about large amounts of capital, and private companies will not part with those amounts of large capital unless they have some form of certainty about the longevity of the program. And it starts with certainty that there's not going to be sudden change in policy which says, I don't want this after they've expended half the money. It then comes in certainty of the returns. So what is the future pricing policy around the energy market? Because anybody investing in nuclear needs certainty for at least a period of the first part of operation that you're going to be able to sell electricity, the product. I think that's becoming easier in a decarbonised world, because quite simply the demand for low carbon electricity is going to go through the roof.
Right, and I was going to ask, how else can that possibly manifest itself? Do you need Parliament to pass a law that guarantees that the nuclear plant won't be shut down for 20 years or something, or how does that work?
No, it comes in the form of energy policy. This is the goal of the energy policy. So yes, we have net zero, but there needs to be some context about how we're going to achieve that and how government's going to enable that market. Because the reality is, at the moment, if you leave it up to the pure commercial markets, they would go down the cheapest route.
But why?
The cheapest route at the moment, in terms of capital, happens to be just put up another CCGT, because they're just the cheapest and quickest things to do in the short term. They're expensive long term.
Yeah.
Because you've got that uncertainty of fuel volatility, but the markets don't always decide the right thing.
But the carbon laws that you guys have passed, your climate policy that you've passed, essentially mitigates the risk from the fossil industry being an economic competitor to the nuclear. But and with your model, I mean, you should be able to provide electricity competitively with renewables, especially when you factor in the cost to utility for baseload and yada yada yada. So what's the challenge in going to some banks, some hedge funds, some private equity groups, and rounding up the first couple $1 billion to make it happen?
There's no challenge in doing that. And absolutely, we naturally want to create companies who have the funding, and actually the operator doesn't necessarily have to be the financier. Even more so in a world where you might not be building an SMR to provide grid electricity, you might be producing an SMR to provide synthetic fuel for transportation, aviation, for example. So yes, you've got parties who may be interested in building a power plant for different reasons, and their business case is therefore predicated on a different set of scenarios which are underpinned by net zero, the legal obligation around 2050. But any of the solutions, let's take clean solutions across heat and transport as an example. An e-fuel, synthetic fuel or hydrogen, are going to be more expensive than the counterparts today. So you could build, say, an SMR to synthetic fuel plant today, and there has to be some incentive or disincentive applied in order for you to overcome that initial cost barrier. Until you built it at volume and at scale, you're going to be more expensive than, say, digging oil out of the ground, particularly with current oil prices.
Sure, that makes sense for the fuel, but that's looking further down the road. It seems to me that there's already a huge market just to play in the electricity sector, even just in the UK, as fossil industries wind down over the course of the next 20 or 30 years. So I guess what's the, just kind of staying within that narrow realm, is there like a real perceived challenge to prove that your system is competitive, or is it just a matter of going through the engineering process, checking off the boxes, getting the regulatory approval, and building one of these things?
So look, the challenge is multiple. There's a natural challenge from the fact that this is nuclear, and like it or not, nuclear becomes politically ingrained. That's just what it does. Secondly, the reputation of nuclear from an investor perspective is not particularly stellar. Investors, therefore, will want certainty on their investment.
Right.
And that means that they will seek governments to underpin the return that they get.
But why not
for the outlay of the capital? Now,
why not the private market? Like, why doesn't Rolls Royce or some of the other partners, if you guys you built such this amazing coalition that has the construction expertise, that has the manufacturing expertise, it seems like your reputation is so good, and the fact that you are big companies, that you can put equity behind it, that you can just offer the guarantee to the private markets flat out without involving the government at all.
So what we can promise is confidence in our ability to deliver the plans, the price and time frame we say. Until the point we've actually proven that by doing it, any investor who's outlaying the capital to build it is going to be naturally nervous, because the history of nuclear is not great, and we're tarnished with that.
Yeah.
As is everybody else in nuclear.
Yeah, but that's mitigated by charging.
That's where we built some.
Yeah.
Before we can take a pure private investment approach to it. Once we've built some, and we can point to it and say, we built it on time, we built it to budget, here's the business case. At that point, yes, the market's big enough. There's sufficient investors out there who will, and at the capital we're talking, will invest in this plan. But we've got to overcome that hurdle. We've got to demonstrate that we can do what we say on the tin. And that means that, as a minimum, to attract commercial investment into the build of the first units, those investors will want to see some certainty, some backstop that limits their exposure. And that's in the form of a contract for difference, a regulated asset-based model, some form, power purchase agreement, which limits their exposure.
And
that's where the role of government needs to play in the near term.
That's great. And then, but aren't there already good precedents, especially in the UK, for that contract for difference? I mean, can't you essentially, based on historical examples of nuclear, assume that you're going to get $100 megawatt hour guarantee?
I don't think we can assume that we'll get $100 a megawatt hour.
Or I guess what could you negotiate right now?
Because we're in a world where electricity prices have come down recently with increasing renewables.
So
it's not sustainable, but that's the reality.
So what's a good price that you think? Because I'm always interested in how can we expedite this. So it seems to me like there's a model here where you could say, okay, we're going to lock in an $80 megawatt hour guarantee or $60 megawatt hour guarantee. But because of our, what we're able to demonstrate internally and what we've proven to ourselves, given our manufacturing expertise, given our EPC, engineering, procurement, construction expertise, we know that when we sell this thing, the electricity is only going to cost us $40 megawatt hour. So we can make that $20 or $40 megawatt hour over the lifetime, and then we just go to the private markets and say, okay, I understand you're a little wary about nuclear, so instead of charging us a 5% risk premium, charge us a 6% risk premium or an 8 or a 9% risk premium, and let's call it a day and let's get one of these things built.
Yeah, you're spot on. So we know the first thing we can do is we can control things that are in our control. And what's in our control is the design of the plant and the cost of the capital, overnight cost of capital, and to a degree some of the operational costs, because that's a function of how we design it for the refueling cycle, how we design it for maintenance, condition-based monitoring, etc. What we can't control is the cost of financing.
Yeah.
Now, there's aspects of that we can control once we've demonstrated the plan. Once we've demonstrated we can build it, because financing costs is a function of, yes, the absolute capital, the risk profile or perceived risk profile, and it's the perceived bit which is tricky for nuclear right now.
Yeah.
And the duration of the build.
Yeah.
And we've got a short duration of build, we've got much lower capital, we've removed a lot of the risk. Nevertheless, until we've done it, until we've built one, anyone who's outlaying that money will want to have some protection around their income. So that necessarily will mean a higher electricity price, or it means some other form of risk mitigation from the government that helps bring down the cost of financing. So our range of electricity price is dominated by the cost of financing.
And Rolls Royce can't self-finance this. They can't just issue debt from the company's balance sheet and self-finance a project like this. They're certainly a big enough company, and debt's never been cheaper. Why not just self-finance?
So it's not our business model to finance our own products.
But
in the market.
But isn't that what's necessary? Isn't that what's necessary to show confidence behind a product? I mean, if Rolls Royce is coming out and saying, "Hey, trust us, we did the numbers," like why not put the money where your mouth is, type thing?
Well, we're not an operator of power stations, and there's a lot more complexity into being an operator, an operator of a nuclear asset than just putting the money in.
But isn't all of the
there's a lot of
but all the risk we just established was in the financing of the construction. The operational costs don't seem that they would vary much once the thing is actually built.
Yeah. So it's not our business model, but equally we don't see we need to do that because there are other ways to do it, and we are talking with customers who accept the benefits of SMRs. They've been through our program, they've done their due diligence, and actually under the right environment, they are willing to build. The UK is somewhat unique in the fact that, and I guess similar to the US, compared to the rest of Europe, we don't have a state-owned utility, so we are in a slightly different position. When we talk about international markets, we know how it will be financed, and we know the operators exist today who have that capability. We also have the opportunity where we can access things like UK export finance for export plants, which massively brings down that cost of equity and brings down cost of electricity.
And that's for when you're exporting internationally.
We can reduce the cost of borrowing and therefore reduce the cost of electricity from this plant. And there's not a one-size-fits-all solution. It depends on the market, depends on the customer. It's a horse for courses. And does, to a lot of degree, it does depend on timing, because until the point we built that first one, people will be naturally cautious of nuclear.
Yeah. And who are the types of customers in the UK? Because it seems to me like the first few would have to be built in the UK to take advantage of the fact. So first, if you're going through the licensing process in the UK, it's going to be built in the UK. And then if you're going to use this factory model to show how you can reduce costs, the first few are going to be in the UK. Let's say the first 10 or 20 or something. So who are the types of customers that would actually operate a facility in the UK? Is this Electricité de France? Is that the only game in town?
First off, it's not necessarily true that the first unit has to be in the UK. We'll license it in the UK, and that is critical because all international markets are looking to the UK regulatory system because it's extremely well regarded.
Has that ever been done before, where a power plant has been regulated by a nuclear power plant has been regulated by one country, but never built in that country, but built somewhere else?
Not to my knowledge. AP1000 was built first in China, not the US. It's an example. Now they are building in the US. But it was regulated first in the US. It's the regulation that's just the key point. You have to have it regulated by your own nation, because that demonstrates it demonstrates a trajectory that, of course, you're on that build schedule. But different countries have different approaches to infrastructure programs. In some territories, it's slower than others. But it does seem like you just want to get on and do it.
It does seem like the UK is a good market, because you guys do have very high electricity prices relative to other parts of the world, right?
Well, these things are always relative. It depends. Our electricity price, if you look at wholesale electricity price, it goes up and down dramatically. In fact, it's quite startling. Not just the annual variance, but daily variance. And it's not anymore just a function of pure demand on the grid. It's actually a function of the generation imbalance as well, because the more renewables we put on, the more intermittency we put on, the greater the uncertainty that you get. We have quite a lot of cloudy, windless days in the UK, and that is not a great mix for renewables. We often quite have cloudy, windless and cold days, so electricity demand in those periods is high. So there's an extra dimension now being thrown into the mix with the advent of increased renewables, and all that's doing is putting more and more volatility into the electricity price at a wholesale level. So that's one of the areas where SMRs nuclear is absolutely key, because it can really bring some stability, not just in terms of grid inertia physically, but also in terms of pricing. And I think the other key thing about the way energy markets are changing is the notion that one of the issues with nuclear was it couldn't load follow. That's becoming broadly irrelevant now, because this isn't just about load following on the grid. This is about load following the energy system. And the reality is a nuclear plant, particularly an SMR, has a lot of versatility in terms of how you can flex its output. And I can flex the output not now based on just a demand, but potentially based on economics. So if the demand and economics aren't right, then I'll do something else. I'll generate hydrogen and store it, for example, or I'll generate a synthetic fuel. When it then flips the other way, I've got opportunities. I can either sell hydrogen or synthetic fuel, or I could stick it back through a CCGT and sell it as electricity. So you can start to introduce benefits to the grid and the markets by balancing between energy vectors of transport, heat, and power, which hasn't historically been possible. And you need things like e-fuels and hydrogen in order to do that. And it's done at a level which batteries just aren't capable of doing. So, but equally, you need a lot of energy. You need to be playing with a lot of power, and you need certainty on when you're going to be able to produce, because you need that certainty to know when you want to store and when you might want to not store.
Yeah, I mean,
So
listen,
the
case for SMRs is amazing in general. So, as I'm always pushing people on the show, faster, faster, faster. When is the soonest that you think that we might get a Rolls Royce SMR turning electrons onto the grid?
Yeah, we're targeting 2029.
And what would be the one thing if I'd say, hey, let's get it done by 2026? That's still 6 years. What would be the one thing that you'd say is the pain point that we need to go after to make it happen by 2026?
Yeah, so the critical path with a nuclear plant is always the regulation and licensing, and then quickly followed by the supply chain. Standing up the supply chain to deliver the product set.
Well, there's no one better than Rolls Royce at supply chain, right?
Well, we like to think we know what we're doing with supply chain. We do have a very large supply base, and even in nuclear, our supply chain is live. So yeah, we've got high confidence in them. Of course, they're going to have some development activity to do and capacity increases to put in that, and those aspects do quickly become the critical path. So, and then you've got to build it and install it. Regulatory regimes are the biggest risk to it, if I'm honest, because you can easily introduce a further, we've seen it in the past, a 2-year delay for regulatory process is common if you've got too much innovation. So we're doing two things on that basis. First is when we're sanctioning our innovations, the regulatory question is one which we ask very hard. And if we're uncertain, we go and talk to the regulator about it. Because one thing we have to avoid is having a single innovation that causes a delay to everything. So those are two things we're doing to try and mitigate that. But the reality is that, these things, the processes that are in place to do these, they are finite times which are outside of our control today. Yes, can we design things more quickly? You can always say you can design things more quickly. There's certain parts of the design program around validation verification, for example, which necessarily require time. They are time-driven validation exercises, and they're there to avoid us having to build full-scale prototypes as used in the past. So the overall benefit is much better, but they necessarily introduce time. And finally, you've always got the case of you can, if it takes one man 10 days to dig a hole, it doesn't mean that 10 men can dig it in a day. And that is a fact of life. But what we're doing in order to assess how much we can accelerate is assessing each of those critical path items and understanding what we can do, but also who the other actors are that can influence those. What we're also not prepared to do is come up with some very near-term date, which is incredible, because people who work in this industry, our customers, they know what's credible, they know what's not, and our program is credible, and we'll stick to that because we know we can deliver it.
Alan Woods, thank you so much for your time today. Really appreciate having you.
Thank you. Thanks.
And initiate at least a new approach to the many difficult problems that must be solved in both private and public conversation if the world is to shake off the inertia imposed by fear and is to make positive progress toward peace.